they wanted to stand sideways or something like that.
Yes, to be much closer so they can stand sideways.
After that, we need to have the ministers with us as well. So let's, yeah. So if you can take the honorable ministers can please join. Give the value of this speech. Honorable Minister, please.
Those who have the reports behind should also show it.
Okay, we need to go back. Just a bit. We need to go back.
The photo will accommodate everyone. The talented photographers will capture everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. No, excellent.
The Office of the Special Advisor on Africa, the African Union Commission, the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa, and we are joined here by His Excellency Gedeti, the Under Secretary-General and Executive Secretary of UNICA, and the United Nations as well Development Program, and all partners whose collaboration has made today's event possible. I thank you all for your presence and wish you a productive and successful meeting. According to the program, we are supposed to start by opening remarks with our dear sister, Under Secretary-General Cristina Duarte. Though she cannot join us in person, she was supposed to join us virtually, but in absence of this, her statement is going to be read by our dear brother, Mr. Jean-Paul Adam, Director, Policy, Monitoring and Advocacy in OSA. So the floor is yours, my dear brother.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency Ambassador Idris, Your Excellency the Deputy Chairperson of the African Union. The United Nations Office of the Special Advisor on Africa is pleased to co-organize this year's Africa Day event with the African Union Commission, the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa, the United Nations Development Programme, and the African Development Bank. I would like to also extend our sincere thanks to the African Union Permanent Observer Mission to the United Nations for hosting us at today's event. This year's voluntary national reviews remind us where the 2030 agenda stands, with less than 5 years of implementation remaining. Many African states have reported real progress, yet progress against SDGs has also stalled or in some cases reversed. And countries have reported the same constraint year after year. The gap between the resources a country holds and the fiscal space those resources actually deliver. Today I would like to speak to that constraint directly and offer a perspective on addressing it. The theme of this ministerial meeting is advancing the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development and Agenda 2063 through transformative and coordinated actions. As I will soon conclude my term as Special Advisor on 31st July, I will frame my remarks around 4 years of research undertaken by the Office of the Special Advisor on Africa, and what we believe offers a genuinely transformative action available to African states now, the adoption of a strategic asset management approach. In 2023, UN-OSA's flagship report named a paradox that many in this room will recognize. Africa is rich in financial, energy, and agricultural resources, yet the continent continues to face debt distress, energy poverty, and food insecurity. We called this the triple paradox, and we showed how each element feeds the others.
His Excellency Fabrice David, the Junior Minister of Agri, Industry, Food Security, Blue Economy and Fisheries of Mauritius. Of course, ably represented by Jean-Paul Adam, thank you for reading the speech. My sister Cristina Duarte, and I really want to appreciate her leadership, her commitment to Africa every day of her mandate over the last few years. His Excellency, of course, my brother Mohammed, the permanent observer of the African Union to the UN, ministers and heads of delegation, And let me underscore the women leaders that I have the pleasure of meeting who are here in this room today. Excellencies, sisters and brothers, distinguished guests. It's a pleasure to be back in this room. It's my home, and I thank the African Union Observer Mission, Office of the Special Advisor in Africa, ECA, UNDP, and the African Development Bank for convening us once again. Africa Day is where the high-level political forum hears the continent speak for itself. This year, that voice is stronger than ever. 19 African countries are presenting VNRs from every sub-region at every stage of development, each one opening its books to the world. I want to congratulate all 19 for their submissions. A voluntary national review is an act of leadership, and I want to commend Egypt presenting their 4th VNR and Togo their 5th. Excellencies, this morning we also launched the 2026 Africa Sustainable Development Report, produced jointly by the African Union, the African Development Bank, UNDP and ECA, and I want to recognize Clara Gatite, I think I see you in the room this morning, who has been active throughout the week. This is the 9th in the series and focused on the 5 goals under review at this year's forum: water and sanitation, energy, industry and infrastructure, cities and partnerships. I've looked at the reviews and the Union's own assessment under Agenda 2063. And this report, side by side, 3 messages come through all of them. And I'd like to share them to frame our discussion today. The first message: access is spreading, but quality is the promise we have yet to keep. The gains Africa has made are significant, and we should say so and celebrate them. Progress is recorded in 12 of the 17 goals. Basic drinking water now reaches 81% of our populations, up from 56% in 2013. Electricity access has risen from 46% to 53% since 2015. Mobile networks now cover almost 93% of our population, and connectivity is opening doors for digital services across the continent. For our young people, that connectivity can be a bridge to education, to enterprise and decent work, but only if it is affordable, reliable, and matched by the investment skills that are needed. However, quantity and quality do not equate, and if we hold ourselves to that standard, as we should, a different story emerges. For water that is safe to drink, coverage reaches 36% of the continent, against a global average of 70%. Only 3 in 10 Africans have safely managed sanitation, and 650 million of us lack even the basic facilities. Some 970 million Africans still cook with polluting fuels, and the smoke takes around 400,000 lives every year, most of them women and children. The disparities compound the challenge. More than 8 in 10 urban Africans have electricity. In rural areas, 4 in 10. Nearly half of our urban population lives in informal settlements, twice the global average. Continental averages can hide all of this, and gains in one sub-region can mask a reversal in another. So the VNRs convey real progress, and the report confirms it. But access to services is not enough until we see the quality of services for everyone. The second message: the gap we need to fill is in implementation, specifically financing and the capable institutions with the skills that are needed to deliver. This report says it clearly. Africa's challenge is not a lack of frameworks. The 2030 Agenda and Agenda 2063 give us the vision, and they reinforce each other. In fact, the Agenda 2063 is far more ambitious than we see in the second 10-year plan, the roadmap towards that, aligned with the 2030 Agenda. What does stand between the plans and the people is fragmented implementation, limited financing, and constrained institutional capacities. Consider what the report tells us about money. Government revenue averages 23% of GDP against a global average of 32%. Tax revenue stands at about 16%. More than 20 countries are at high risk of debt distress or already in it, and borrowing costs remain out of line with the fundamentals. Official development assistance to Africa continues to fall. Annual investment in energy access runs at around $4 billion, far below the target. And all of this against a backdrop of a global environment, delivering shock after shock. The instability in the Middle East has amplified food, energy and fertilizer price volatility, with direct spillovers into African economies. The response has two parts, and both are within reach. The report tells us what we need to do, both at home and abroad. At home, the report points to what works: broaden the tax base, digitalize revenue collection, curb illicit flows. In Zambia, the government's bus service, for example, more than doubled non-tax revenue in 2 years, from $500 million to over $1.2 billion. Remittances at more than $104 billion have proven the most stable external flow we have. Reducing the transaction costs is money on the table. Abroad, the international financial architecture must change. Sevilla gave us a reform agenda, and member states have launched the Borrowers Platform, a way to negotiate from shared strength rather than alone. But also let us congratulate the African Development Bank that has put on the table the African finance architecture that must be addressed. Financial institutions working hard together to access the $1 trillion to $4 trillion that exist of African money outside of the continent. So this is all there to be used, and let us use it. Beyond this, there needs to be expanded concessional finance, debt relief that restores fiscal space, and member states meeting their promise on climate finance. The report calls these prerequisites, not extras. The third message: Africa's accelerators are African. The report names regional cooperation as a powerful accelerator, and it is. A continent trading with itself through the African Continental Free Trade Area, pooling energies across borders, building shared infrastructure and regional value chains is a more competitive and more resilient continent. But integration must translate into real opportunities for women traders, entrepreneurs to access larger markets, and for young people to move from education and training to decent jobs and livelihoods. The African Union's membership of the G20 gives Africa new leverage in rooms where the rules on debt, climate finance and trade are written. And the report is clear that turning that seat into results depends on coordinated African priorities consistently advanced. This morning I attended the roundtable on the inequalities panel, the International Panel for Inequalities, that was led by South Africa at the G20 together with Brazil and with Spain. This is huge opportunities for us to address the inequalities on the continent and globally. 41 African countries now have statistical legislation meeting international standards, and 39 are implementing national statistical plans. The 19 reviews before this forum are supported by these systems. If we cannot measure the investment outcomes that we get, then there is a lot of missing people in the results. This was made clear in Addis, and I'm glad that we will hear from my sister, the Deputy Chairperson, this morning. Excellencies, together, these three messages point one way. Africa does have a vision that is still representative of the people's aspirations. Africa is building the tools. But this cannot be done without peace. At the center is silencing the guns. We welcome the efforts and the opportunity the latest opportunity that we've had for peace on the continent, led by Algeria and Mali. Without peace, we cannot get sustainable development. It will be difficult to achieve. But we need the foundations of lasting democracies, of governance, to ensure that peace holds when we find it. The UN is ready to support and accompany you, our resident coordinators and country teams, with the technical expertise behind national priorities. And while we deliver the promise of 2030, as the President of the General Assembly said yesterday, using football as an analogy, much can be done in the last minute of a game. Many goals can be scored. We are thinking beyond 2030 at the same time, and Africa should not be a chapter in somebody else's draft. Africa must hold the pen and inform the global narrative. And that means ensuring that we have women and young people at the table where these priorities are set. My hope for today is that we leave with decisions on financing, on genuine partnerships, and on delivery of the promises that we have made to the continent, a future for all Africans. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Excellency Amina Mohammed, UN.
So for embodying women's leadership, African women's leadership at the global stage in such exemplary and bold manner, but also for your leadership and legacy when it comes to the sustainable development. Excellency Mr. Mohammed, Chair of the 12th session of the African Regional Forum on Sustainable Development, Honorable Minister present with us this morning. In her absence, Excellency, Mrs. Cristina Duarte, USG Special Advisor on Africa, represented by Mr. Jean-Paul Adam, my brother, Mr. Clara Gatete, USG and Executive Secretary of UNECA, Excellency Ambassador Idris, our host and AU Permanent Observer to the United Nations, ladies and gentlemen. I am very pleased to address this 2026 Africa Day at the HLPF, also marking both the launch of the 2026 Africa Sustainable Development Report, but also the first biennial Continental Progress Report on the second 10-year implementation plan of Agenda 2063. Allow me to extend the African Union Commission's sincere appreciation to our long-standing partners, the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa, the United Nations Development Programme, the African Development Bank, the United Nations Office of the Special Advisor on Africa, and the African Institute for Economic Development and for the excellent collaboration that has made today's event possible. This annual gathering has become Africa's premier platform for a common continental voice on sustainable development, sharing experiences from our member states and strengthening our engagement and partnership with Africa's development partners on both Agenda 2063 and the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. Excellencies, this year's theme, which is advancing the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development and Agenda 2063 through transformative and coordinated actions, could not be more timely. Indeed, only 4 years remain before the target year for sustainable development goals, while Africa enters the second decade for acceleration towards implementing the second 10-year implementation plan of Agenda 2063. The world around us continues to evolve rapidly. Global economic uncertainty, climate change, geopolitical tensions, debt burdens, and constrained fiscal space continue to test African economies. Yet, Africa remains a continent of resilience and opportunity, and I would like to emphasize that. Africa remains a continent of resilience and opportunity, and I think that was really ably highlighted by Mr. Jean-Paul Adam in the statement of Adam Duarte. Africa is among the fastest growing regions globally, with a youthful population and expanding digital economies. Our challenge, therefore, is how quickly we can transform commitments into outcomes our citizens can feel every day. This is precisely why the 2026 Africa Sustainable Development Report and the first biennial Continental Progress Report on the second 10-year implementation plan of Agenda 2063 matters. These are evidence-based policy instruments that enable African leaders and development partners to understand where Africa stands and to determine collectively the actions required to place our continent firmly on the pathway of both Sustainable Development Goals and Agenda 2063. Both agendas are not two separate journeys. They are complementary roadmaps guiding Africa towards inclusive growth, structural transformation, and shared prosperity. The African Union Commission is particularly proud to have jointly prepared the 2026 Africa Sustainable Development Report together with the African Development Bank, the United Nations Development Programme, and the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa. A partnership that reflects our shared conviction that Africa's development aspirations can only be realized through coordinated action and integrated planning. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, the 2026 Africa Sustainable Development Report represents a balanced picture. Africa continues to make progress, but not yet fast enough to meet our 2030 and 2063 ambitions. For instance, we are gaining ground in expanding access to clean water, renewable energy, digital connectivity, and regional cooperation. Yet, access to safely managed water and sanitation still lacks. Energy access, particularly in rural areas, remains inadequate. Industrialization and value addition are progressing too slowly to create the jobs our youth need, and financing gaps remain among the greatest obstacles to implementation. These findings are reinforced by the first biennial Continental Progress Report of the second 10-year implementation plan of Agenda 2063, which records an overall continental performance of 53% across all 7 aspirations. Strong progress has been made in aligning national plans with Agenda 2063 and advancing digital transformation. But structural transformation, productive employment, infrastructure connectivity, and sustainable financing continues to demand greater attention. The gap between policy commitment and actual delivery remains one of our greatest challenges. Both reports therefore point to the same response. Strengthen domestic resource mobilization, expand climate and development finance, accelerate digital transformation, invest in sustainable infrastructure, and deepen partnerships at every level, while strengthening national delivery systems and data capacity, and protecting development gains from conflicts and climate change. And I think that my sister DSG has really so clearly highlighted the intrinsic link between development, peace, and stability. Excellencies, the key message emerging from both reports is clear. What is now required is faster implementation, stronger partnerships, increased investment, and collective, and the time for incremental progress has passed. This is the decade for acceleration delivery. For the African Union Commission, this means working even more closely with our member states to strengthen national planning and data systems, and to ensure that Agenda 2063 is fully integrated into national budgets and investment frameworks. At the continental level, we must accelerate flagship initiatives central to Africa's transformation, including the African Continental Free Trade Area, the Programme for Infrastructure Development in Africa, the Single African Air Transport Market, our high-speed rails network, and the digital transformation strategy. But also the African Medicines Agency. These are not simply projects. They are catalysts for transformation, integration, and shared prosperity of our continent. Their implementation certainly also requires that we work more on our partnerships, resource mobilization strategies, debt sustainability, and innovative financing mechanisms and models, amongst many others. Excellencies, Africa's greatest asset is not found beneath its soil. It is found in the ingenuity, resilience, and aspirations of its people, particularly its women and youth. Our responsibility is to create an enabling environment that allows them to thrive through quality education, decent jobs, digital opportunities, and inclusive governance. And I think that we all have in mind those young sons and daughters that are innovating to adapt to their environment, and they are creating solutions. So the asset is in our youth and our children. As we launch the 2026 Africa Sustainable Development Report, let us recommit ourselves to turning evidence into action, commitments into implementation, and partnerships into measurable results. Together, We can build an Africa where every child has access to clean water and quality education, where our cities are inclusive, resilient and sustainable, and where peace, security and partnerships unlock the full potential of our continent. This is the Africa envisioned in Agenda 2063, and this is the legacy we must deliver for present and future generations. Thank you for listening.
Yesterday, during the regional perspectives on SDG implementation, I had the privilege of being the voice of Africa alongside the chairs of the 4 other regional forums on sustainable development. And today is my honor to take the floor once again, this time during our special event, the Africa Day at the High Level Political Forum. Today is our day. It is the day where African voices come together not only to assess progress, but to shape the future. And it is also a privilege to launch the Africa Sustainable Development Report 2026, whose evidence and recommendations will guide our collective efforts as we enter the decisive final stretch towards 2030. Ladies and gentlemen, Africa occupies a unique place in the global sustainable development architecture. We are the only region in the world implementing 2 complementary sustainable development agendas simultaneously. The 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, which is our shared global framework with its 17 SDGs, now entering its final 4 years, and the African Union Agenda 2063, our own 50-year continental vision built around 7 aspirations and successive 10-year implementation plans. And these 2 agendas are not competing visions. They are mutually reinforcing. They are not in opposition. They are in coordination. One provides a global direction, the other reflects Africa's own aspirations. And together, they define the future we want to build. And Africa is a continent of extraordinary diversity. We are 54 countries, more than 1.5 billion people, representing nearly 19% of the world's population. We are North, South, East, West, and Central Africa. We are landlocked countries, coastal states, and island states. And my own country, Mauritius, is proud to be an African small island developing state. We represent different levels of income, different cultures, and different realities. Yet, despite this diversity, one truth unites us. Africa is one continent, one people, one future. And we want that future to be resilient, inclusive, and sustainable. Yes, we want a sustainable Africa driven by our 2 complementary agendas. Excellencies, the 12th session of the Africa Regional Forum on Sustainable Development, held in Addis Ababa in April this year, was convened under the theme Turning the Tide, Transformative and Coordinated Actions for the 2030 Agenda and Agenda 2063. And allow me to express my sincere appreciation to the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa, the African Union Commission, the African Development Bank, the United Nations system, and all our partners whose leadership, dedication, and commitment made the forum a resounding success. And the message emerging from Addis Ababa was clear. Business as usual is no longer an option. The time has come to move decisively from commitments to implementation, from declarations to delivery, from fragmented interventions to transformative and coordinated action. And the first biennial Continental Progress Report on the second 10-year implementation plan of Agenda 2063 records an overall continental performance score of 53% over the years 2024 and 2025. And this tells us two important stories. The first is encouraging. African countries have made remarkable progress in aligning national development plans and institutional frameworks with both agendas. Digital transformation is advancing. Institutions are becoming stronger. Human development continues to improve. Political commitment has never been stronger. The second story reminds us that planning alone is not enough. A significant implementation gap remains between planning, budgeting, and delivery. And on the 2030 agenda, the picture is equally clear. Africa needs to accelerate progress on 12 of the 17 SDGs and reverse negative trends on the remaining 5 if we want to achieve the targets. Despite determined efforts by African countries and our development partners, progress towards the SDGs remains challenging. This reality demands greater urgency, stronger partnerships, and financing that matches the scale of our ambitions. Ladies and gentlemen, Africa's commitment to accountability is stronger than ever. Today, all 54 African countries have presented at least one voluntary national review. This demonstrates that Africa does not fear assessment. Africa embraces accountability and truly believes that what cannot be measured cannot be improved. And if you allow me, Chair, to use a football analogy, this year, 10 African nations proudly represented our continent at the FIFA World Cup. And I can see the minister from Cabo Verde. Cabo Verde remained unbeaten in their group, including against Spain, who will play the final on Sunday. Bravo, Cabo Verde! We are proud of Cabo Verde and the 9 other African teams who played that World Cup. And not far from those football pitches, here in New York, another African team is taking the field. At this high-level political forum, out of the 36 countries presenting biennials, 19 are African countries. Two African countries are presenting their 4th biennial, 11 are presenting their 3rd, 6 are presenting their 2nd. This is the Africa we want. An Africa which is future-oriented, an Africa which is biennial-driven, an Africa that uses evidence to assess progress, strengthen accountability, and accelerate implementation. Excellencies, the discussions in Addis Ababa identified 5 strategic priorities to turn the tide, and I will be quite quick on those priorities. First, accelerating implementation through transformative action. The solutions are known. The challenge is scaling up and delivering them faster. Second, scaling up financing for sustainable development. Domestic resource mobilization, innovative financing, debt sustainability, and improved access to affordable development finance must therefore become central pillars of implementation. Third, investing in the enablers of structural transformation. This year, high-level political forum reviews SDGs 6, 7, 9, 11, and 17. Water, energy, infrastructure, innovation, sustainable cities, and partnerships. And these are not standalone goals. Together, they are the foundations upon which resilient economies, decent jobs, food security, industrialization, climate resilience, and human well-being depend. Africa's transformation requires intensified investment in these interconnected priorities. Fourth, harnessing science, technology, innovation, and data. Digital transformation is no longer a choice. It is a powerful accelerator of sustainable development. It improves governance, strengthens accountability, expands opportunities, and empowers our youth and our women. Fifth and final, strengthening partnerships as the catalyst for success. SDG 17 is not simply another goal. It is the accelerator that connects all the other SDGs. No government can deliver sustainable development alone. No international organization can do it alone. No financial institution, no private sector, no civil society organization. Success depends on stronger partnerships at every level. Ladies and gentlemen, today as we launch the Africa Sustainable Development Report 2026, let us not see it simply as another report. Let us see it as a roadmap, as a source of evidence, as a guide for better practices, and above all, a call to accelerate implementation. Excellencies, brothers and sisters, Africa has the youngest population in the world. Africa possesses immense natural resources. Africa is rich in innovation, entrepreneurship, and human talent. Africa has the vision. Africa has the roadmap. What we need now is accelerated implementation, stronger partnerships, and financing that matches our ambition. In closing, as chair of the 12th session of the Africa Regional Forum of Sustainable Development, I call upon all stakeholders, African governments, the United Nations system, international financial institutions, development partners, the private sector, and the civil society to renew their commitments and intensify cooperation during this decisive final stretch to 2030. If we act with urgency, with solidarity and determination, Agenda 2030 and Agenda 2063 will not remain aspirations on paper. They will become a reality for the 1.5 billion Africans we serve, and a powerful contribution to a more prosperous, resilient, and sustainable world. Allow me to conclude with these words that I have shared before about being African. I said it earlier this year in Kampala. I said it once again in Addis Ababa. And today in New York, I say it once again. I am not African because I was born in Africa, but because Africa was born in me. I thank you all for that.
The gap has now reached approximately $4 trillion annually for developing countries. The instability in the Middle East has further intensified uncertainty, disrupting trade routes, increasing energy and food price volatility, and placing additional pressure on developing economies, including those in Africa. Recent UN assessments warn that these disruptions are amplifying inflationary pressures and raising borrowing costs precisely when many countries can least afford them. And yet, despite these formidable headwinds, Africa is not retreating. It is adapting, innovating, and moving forward, as mentioned before. A few months ago, leaders gathered in Addis Ababa under the theme, as mentioned by the Minister, Turning the Tide, Transformative and Coordinated Actions for the 23rd Agenda and Agenda 2063. The message was unequivocal. Africa is determined not merely to manage a crisis, but to drive transformation. It is in this global and continental context that the 2026 Africa Sustainable Development Report provides both a timely assessment of where Africa stands and a clear direction for the journey ahead. Indeed, the 2026 Africa Sustainable Development Report confirms that Africa has made significant strides. We see that progress echoed in the 19 African countries presenting voluntary national reviews at this high-level political forum. Their experiences inform us that even in the midst of multiple global shocks, Africa continues to advance. They also reinforce a clear message: the time for delivery is now. And indeed, across the continent, tangible gains are visible in infrastructure development, digital innovation, renewable energy expansion, regional integration, and access to services. But the report also delivers a candid message. Progress is not fast enough. Financing constraints, infrastructure deficits, climate impacts, conflicts, and debt service pressures continue to slow implementation. The gap must now close. The gap we must now close is not an ambition gap, but an execution gap, as mentioned by previous speakers. Because what good are commitments if they do not change lives? What value is a target if it does not, for example, create jobs for our young people, or connect farmers to markets, or provide clean water and electricity for families? The imperative, therefore, is to transform our plans into policies and actions. And that
countries are engaging with the development agenda. The question before us is no longer about ambition alone. It is about translating ambition into delivery. Water and sanitation system that works, energy that powers homes and enterprises, infrastructures that connect people and markets, productive cities, and partnerships that unlock opportunities at scale. This challenge is precisely what the Africa Sustainable Development Report 2026 highlights. It shows progress in policy alignment, institutional reforms, digital transformation, and human development, but also achievement we should recognize and build on. It's not also reminding us that the space of change remains insufficient, especially in structural transformation, productive employment, and infrastructure connectivity, climate resilience, so domestic resource mobilization, and peace and security. The report also points to the implementation gap, planning, budgeting, and delivery. Fiscal constraints, debt services pressures, statistical and data gaps, and climate-related shocks are making acceleration harder. These challenges reinforce the urgency of translating policies, commitment into finance, measurable and locally delivered outcomes. This is why this Africa Days matters. It gives us an opportunity to move beyond stock-taking and ask, what will it take to accelerate implementation now? From UNDP perspective, Excellencies, distinguished delegates, three shifts are essential. First, we must treat review processes as instrument for delivery. Voluntary national review should not only report progress, they should help countries identify what is broken, what needs to be improved, financed, and scaled. Voluntary local review can also bring evidence closer to where implementation happens. Second, we must go deeper. Yeah.